everyone. Welcome to the third agenda of today at the main stage. My name is Hui Fen. I'm the editor of the Business Times. I will be moderating this session on from deserts to deltas, how Southeast Asia and the Middle East can foster cross-regional startup ecosystems. Maybe just to talk a little bit about logistics, I'm going to ask all of you here to do a little bit of homework as we kickstart the panel discussion. I will leave about the last 15 minutes or so of the panel discussion for the floor to ask questions. After all, you guys paid for tickets here, so it's your chance to ask whatever questions you have of the panel. In the middle of the discussion, we will flash a QR code for you to input on your mobile devices the questions that you want, and the backstage crew will try to filter some of it in order of impact and importance. So while we're doing the panel discussion, do start to think in your mind what are the things you would like to ask, okay? So allow me to put things into context first. Countries in the Middle East have traditionally favored Western markets when it comes to investments, but we are noticing capital flows from the Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC region, coming into Asia. Understandably, this is due to deliberate strategies to diversify the economies from hydrocarbon wealth, and probably because of the increased political scrutiny in the West. Now, with me here today are four distinguished panelists. We have Melvin and Aditya, representing the views from two fast-growing companies, Arola and Animind Group, and Norman, representing Malaysia's Cradle Fund, whose mandate is to look at nurturing early-stage startups and creating 5,000 startups in Malaysia by 2025. Actually, that's this year. We also have Abdullah from Abu Dhabi Early Childhood Authority. His organization supports international startups in early childhood development through mentorship, funding, and strategic partnerships. So let's kickstart this discussion with a universal question. This is for everyone on this panel. From your unique vantage point, whether in accelerating, investing, or building and marketing, what is one common misconception that people have about the tech or startup ecosystem in your home market? Maybe we can start with Norman.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Good morning. I would say in Malaysia, there's not really much of a lack of early stage funding, actually. So we do have quite a lot of options, either be it from government grants or from private equity crowdfunding. But I would say that one of the biggest misconceptions is actually trying to convince more private equity to come at earlier stage. So, as a government, we have limited resources that we can actually disburse out via grants. So let me put it in perspective. Every year we get about 500 to 600 applications for grants, but we can only fund 100 of them.
That's 20%.
Exactly, right? So where would the others go to? So there's only a few angel investors, there's not that many, and equity crowdfunding as well, not many people know how to work around it as well. So I think the key challenge for us is actually to get more private corporates to come in earlier, to work with the startups. So there's a bit of a misconception that it's a bit hard for corporates to work with startups. Actually, it is not impossible. We just need to open up more to each other. So, if I can add a little bit more, that's why this year we're doing an initiative within a corporate and startup innovation partnership. So we're starting with the government-owned companies. Next year, we're actually expanding it to private-owned companies to get more corporates to come in at earlier stage.
Would that be highly popular among the corporates?
Very much so. Because when the government comes in to pump in some money, yes, they will come in. But what we want actually is to really spark that and open them up to actually the idea of working with startups. That's what we're trying to do.
Right, okay. So for Melvin, can you talk about your home market? I would presume it's Singapore?
Yes, since I'm based out of Singapore, so I will represent Singapore in that sense. I would say one misconception about Singapore is that it is a very small country, right? And it is a base for many of the major multinational companies, but may not be a good place for startups. But if we really look into it as a country and look at all the startups that's actually being founded over there, Singapore actually did produce quite a few significant unicorns. The most notable ones would probably be like Grab, Sea Limited, and even Razer, right? And of course, Eralo, right? So I think many startups will usually use Singapore as a very good launch pad to be able to connect to the different parts of Southeast Asia. And that is something that many organizations should definitely look into, that potential connectivity through the Singapore market.
So small market, but still there are other ways to make big money.
Exactly. I mean, people will tend to use Singapore as a launch pad to tap into the 700 million people in Southeast Asia. So you can't rely on just a Singapore market alone, but definitely it's a connection or the connectivity that actually helps the whole ecosystem and gels everyone together.
Okay, how about Aditya? You basically come from a global company. Which market actually is your home market?
Unlike Melvin, I don't have the luxury of being only in Singapore. So I would probably speak about MENA because for us, MENA has been our
MENA.
growth frontier. I think one of the misconceptions, and good morning everyone, first of all, thank you for being here. One of the misconceptions I think is that both in Southeast Asia and in the Middle East, we've seen people think that these are monolithic markets. These are not monolithic markets. You know, the enterprise is very different. You see, the UAE and Saudi Arabia itself are two different beasts altogether. One is driven by the vision of 2030. The other, UAE, is the global hub for capital and connectivity. I think what has been primal for our company is that we've gone ahead and understood that localization is key. We have to get in there, understand the cultural nuances, set teams, set markets, and have locals. And quite frankly, it is quite a melting pot. So it brings in its own challenges, while there are huge opportunities as well. Each of these markets have their own rhythm, their own rule book, their own runway. So we just have to understand that it is not a monolithic ecosystem, it is a mosaic that is in motion. And as long as we understand and appreciate that, I think companies like us, and I speak from experience, we've been lucky to, and it's been, well earned, I think, for us.
So I'm more familiar with Southeast Asia, and I do see it as a melting pot. It's very heterogeneous. How is it like in Middle East, for instance? Is it also different markets that you have to localize for UAE, for Qatar, for Saudi?
Yeah, I think this is the misconception that people have, right? You can't look at bubbles alone. You can't look at Saudi and UAE alone. GCC also has Qatar, Kuwait, Oman, and each of these countries are also bringing in a lot for the startup ecosystem. There are a lot of sovereign wealth funds that are willing to invest. Of course, it is not early stage, but they want more, I think, experienced founders from Southeast Asia, repeat founders from Southeast Asia, who have learned through experimentation to kind of come in and look at it. So I think the way that we looked at this, the GCC pod within the MENA ecosystem, we see that each country brings its own set of opportunities. So language is definitely unifying, but then culturally, they can be very different. Very, very different.
Can you give one example? Culturally.
UAE has become, a melting pot of sorts. So, if you go in, what I see as culture is creativity and competence, right? Now that culture, I used to see that in Southeast Asia as well. I've been in Southeast Asia for the last 15 years now. So I can assure you that there is that unique sense of capital and enterprise that is going into MENA because there is large money there, but it is sophisticated. You need to have a sense of sophistication to be able to drive, even raise capital, for example. So you cannot just go ahead and be an early stage startup. I see that there's a lot more opportunity for founders that are looking at large problems and solving for a large demography, also for a large geography. So it's not going to be like small problems, small ecosystem, and then you scale, and then you become a middle stage startup, and then you grow. I think they are willing to invest large sums of money once they start trusting you.
Okay, over to Abdullah, because you come from Abu Dhabi, perhaps you can give us a perspective of Abu Dhabi and then the misconception that people have about that.
So, good morning, everyone. I would say the most common misconception in the Abu Dhabi startup scene is that it's primarily or purely financial driven and capital driven, and that success is measured by access to funds rather than co-building. And I think reality speaks a completely different story. Abu Dhabi in the past, Abu Dhabi currently has shifted its role from being purely a financier to being a co-creator or co-developer of solutions, if you would like. And through initiatives like the Hub 71 accelerator programs or ACA's and Jazi accelerator program, what we aim to do is we aim to do more than just attract startups to Abu Dhabi. We aim to actually integrate them within our sectors such as health, education, sustainability. And so our founders are solving real problems that exist in Abu Dhabi, and they're not just solving financial ones. And that's what I believe is going to be the next chapter of the Abu Dhabi startup story.
Right. So conversely then, what is the single most compelling synergy that you see between Southeast Asia and Middle East startup ecosystems right now?
So I start this?
Yes.
The most compelling synergies between both regions, I believe, is impact entrepreneurship. And what do I mean by impact entrepreneurship? I mean, both regions realize that innovation must be for the people. It must serve the people. Must be human-centric. And so the strongest point, I believe, in Southeast Asian market is that very fast-paced, agile, inclusive innovation that's designed for complexities and adaptability, while the strongest points in the MENA region, and specifically Abu Dhabi, deep capital, opportunities to scale, and also a shared vision between the Southeast Asian region and the Abu Dhabi and MENA Middle Eastern region. And so, yeah, that's what I mean. I believe is the most compelling synergies between both. And together we're a force that's a global force. One region builds fast and the other region scales with purpose.
So scalability versus ideas and agility. Yes. How about Aditya?
I actually second that, So Southeast Asia offers experimentation. It offers, there's a, you're allowed to fail. There are a lot of failed founders that have gone ahead and built large enterprises. So there's this ecosystem that allows enterprise to flourish. Whereas in the Middle East, there's a lot of hunger. There's a lot of expectation for these frameworks and rule books to then traverse into the MENA region, right? Because there is capital. They want to solve for problems. They want to, as going back to what the gentleman here said, it's clearly impact-driven. What kind of impact are you able to bring in? So as long as you're looking within the sustainability, energy, AI, gaming, digital health, you are clearly within that scope, that sweet spot where the investors are ready to kind of invest and grow.
Okay, right. Norman, would you like to contribute to that as well?
Being the third speaker in this line of question is actually tough, but you're going to have the tougher part actually. But definitely, I mean, building on to the points that you guys have put up, I would say that my point of view is that both regions are very hungry for innovation. So that drives a lot of policies, a lot of programs to actually find not just one or two synergies, but multiple synergies as well, where we can both work together and build something bigger. Because, I mean, okay, Southeast Asia, 700 million, geographically not as big as MENA, definitely. But then there's so much diversity because every ASEAN member country has its own culture, has its own population, even religions and beliefs and everything, very, very diverse. That's why as an experimentation bed, is actually quite interesting, right? Because I've met a few founders who are very interested to build their, if it's in the field of AI, their LLMs, right, from the multiple languages that we have over in ASEAN. And also some actually go into PTSD, behavioral data, that all this actually the database that you can get from ASEAN is actually very, very deep as well, and it's very, very applicable to the larger global market as well. But having said that, coming to the point of the deep pockets of Middle East, but what we're more interested in, and it's actually quite curious, that it's actually more interesting for me, is actually that population-wise is actually not that small. It's actually almost 400 million. It is quite sizable as well, geographically big, but it is a sizable population. And the kind of technologies that can be used in both regions are actually quite similar, right? Fintech, and even halal tech as well. Yeah, it's huge, this one actually, it's very huge. And that is some of the bigger synergies that we see actually, where both regions can come up with a global solution if we come together. That's what we're aiming for.
Wonderful. Wow, Melvin, you have the hardest part.
Well, I have to agree with what gentlemen have said. I think on my part itself, I believe that being in Southeast Asia, we have a lot of good tech talents. And I think it's growing more and more, right, with all the different investment made by the different governments in the region. This talent goes beyond just a specific industry. It goes from the fintechs to the edtechs, the AI, so many different organizations. So I think the synergy between the two will be very interesting, because I do see that increasing trend that the Middle East regions are having that economic diversifications. So with that economic diversifications combined with the talents in the Southeast Asia region, that would actually be a very good support ecosystem to make this whole startup environment more vibrant. So in that sense, if you look at the Middle East region, when you look at Saudi Arabia, you look at UAE, the technological innovation, the advancements is moving so quickly. And I think that is where we definitely will value that economic diversification that the GCC regions will bring in to this part of the world, tapping on the tech talents here, combining with what Norman have mentioned, have that synergy with the government support to be able to build a tech system or ecosystem that will benefit both regions on that basis.
Thank you. So when we talk about markets, right, whether it's the Middle East market or the Southeast Asian market, it actually means different things to different people. And I think, Melvin, you have kind of alluded to it earlier in your opening as well. So maybe we should also ask, for Melvin, Aditya, and Norman, for a startup looking at the Gulf, right, what is the real price? Is it affluent consumers, or is it something else? Maybe Melvin, this time you can start first.
Sure, thank you. For us, being the world's first and largest travel eSIM marketplace, I tend to think that we have done fairly all right in both regions. I'm very sure out here, sitting in the crowd, in the audience, there are many people who have not heard about Airalo, who have not heard or used an eSIM before, and that's something that we need to be able to educate and do more on that basis. But I think what we have done well is to be able to understand what the market needs, to be able to move in at the right time, look at what the consumer wants in the Middle East region, and how I look into that, right, specifically on the Middle East side, is that it is a relatively affluent population, and people love to travel. And whenever you love to travel, you also want to be able to save certain costs as much as possible to be able to enjoy buying your shopping and things like that. So So I think on that basis itself, we kind of become a very good value proposition for partners or users to be able to leverage on the data savings, and that's how we look into tapping on these users' side. Now, on the other part of things, and I think something that we also did fairly all right, or fairly well, is that we do actually have quite a lot of the different strategic partnerships. It may be strategic partnerships with the financial institutions, regardless whether is it a bank or any other startups or on the fintech side, or even on the different online travel agents or the airlines. So we do have collaborations with airlines like Gulf Air, Emirates as well, and all these strategic partnerships allow us to propel the brand to the next level on that basis. So I would say the combination of the two would actually did help us in terms of our market penetration in the Middle East region.
Right. Great. Norman, over to you.
Right. In Malaysia, I mean, where you mentioned earlier on in the opening, say that, I mean, we are aiming to have 5,000 startups, right? We're actually very close to that now. We're like 4,600 active startups at the moment. So, but not only that, we are also, well, last year we got the mandate to actually lead the ASEAN Startup Initiative. So we are also tracking ASEAN startups as well. Under a unified platform. So if you guys were here yesterday during the opening by the minister where Startup Indonesia was launched, right? So it's a centralized platform for Indonesian startups. So we have something similar in Malaysia as well called My Startup. And in Singapore, we have Startup SG. And hopefully other ASEAN countries will follow suit as well. So then we can see actually that we can actually deep dive even further actually to not just Malaysian startups, but what we can do as a region to come together. All 8,000 or 10,000 or 15,000 startups, how can we support all of you actually to better expand your market beyond just the region? And actually one of the closest region to ASEAN is actually the Middle East, you know, and some of the more accessible market actually, and a very welcoming market. You know, and like I mentioned before, there's a lot of in terms of technology synergies actually. So it's kind of like a safe next step for our startups to take that venture outside of the region and go to the Middle East, you know, where you're welcome and things are actually quite similar in terms of living standards even. So it's not that, so it's actually quite all right to live in the Middle East actually. Everything is actually very modern, so you won't get culture shock that much actually. So you would be able to survive. It's not like going to Europe or Russia where, you know, weather can be a bit harsh. But having said that, I think the market is very welcoming. And I mean, for me, as a Malaysian startup agency, what we want to see more, what we want to encourage more of our startups to be able to grow beyond just the local market and take that first step into the global market. You know, it is via the Middle East. This is the next logical step for us. Politically, financially, market-wise, technology-wise, it just makes sense for us.
So naturally, actually, we know that Malaysia and Indonesia, who are part of Southeast Asia, have natural, cultural and religious affinities with the Middle East as well, right? So Aditya, over to you.
You know, I think while I agree with the fact that there's a lot of synergies that can be brought in because of, as you rightly said, cultural, religious as well, seem to sometimes. But you have to understand also for the Middle East, a lot of these large clients and even government are your potential clients. You know, they are also regulators, but they're also your potential clients. So as institutional clients, you need to align to the strategic vision that the governments have. It's a known fact. So you know, if you as a founder are solving for any strategic vision, you know, be it 2030 Saudi or the Centennial Vision for UAE 2071, you are not just becoming you know, a party to winning contracts. You're also becoming a part of the transformation agenda. And I think that is huge. It is. I highly would encourage a lot of middle stage, late stage startups as well to definitely visit the Middle East, definitely UAE, and experience it firsthand. You know, it's one thing when people said about the Bay Area. what did it do? It created a conducive environment. It almost became a magnet for talent. It was pulling people together from various parts of the world. Middle East that way, I don't know why, I mean, I would rather call it Gulf. Gulf that way is right in the center. And the reason why I dropped Middle East and I'm calling it Gulf is because right in the center of the world, if you look at the world as a flat paradigm and not the globe, but it is centrally located, it is very well connected. The airlines have done really well. It's got, to what Matthew said, it's got a lot of acceptance of different cultures. So while West is coming in and they don't find it starkly different for them, the Easterners don't find it difficult either because it is fairly stable. It's a flattened out world out there. But what is really, really encouraging to see is the appetite for enterprise and how clear the governments are and how well structured and well thought through the visions are. So it is, nothing's laid out as an ambiguous ecosystem, right? It's very clearly laid out. And security, that often kind of, is taken as a hygiene. Security, regulations, policy, all of these are but fuel to growth. And I think Gulf definitely offers all of that. So when you are looking at the Middle East, going back to MENA, I think there is opportunity for, also for investors to come in. Because there are a lot of startups that are starting up in the Middle East as well. So the investors that were sitting out here in Southeast Asia could also start looking at investing with startups there. So I think it's a very conducive environment for transformative change.
Right, and it's not just consumer or even B2B market. Really look at the government sector as well as a market, right? So for Abdullah, over to you. I'll have to reverse the question a different way. For Abu Dhabi and for your authority, do you see Southeast Asia as a potential market, and in what ways?
So yeah, absolutely. We definitely see Southeast Asia. I would say less as a market and more as a co-innovation partner. Many Southeast Asian startups today solve challenges that exist even in Abu Dhabi. So they solve challenges that we also care about back home. And so what we're doing with initiatives like Angel Z is we're trying to explore potential partnerships with these startups that have piloted their solutions across Southeast Asia, whether it's Jakarta, Malaysia, Singapore. So they've tested their pilots and they've proven their concept. And we're trying to explore partnerships in a way that we can bring them to Abu Dhabi, localize, as the gentleman here said. Localization is very important. So we want to bring them to Abu Dhabi, localize their solutions, and also prove that their solutions work. It's not regional, it's global. It's a global solution. And vice versa also. So startups from Abu Dhabi can explore pilots here. And this is what I believe it's what should happen. And also, yeah, that's it.
So, okay, again for you, there's this perception that Middle East startups ecosystems don't need money. There's actually enough capital in the Middle East to stimulate and finance startups. So what exactly do startups in the Middle East need? And do you think really Middle East startups ecosystems don't need capital?
So no, I don't think that's true. No startup does not need capital. I mean, it's true the Middle Eastern region is well known for having deep capital and access to funds, but no startup doesn't need capital. It's a fact. And other than capital, startups need access. And yes, access to funds is one part of it, but they also need access to private and public partnerships. They need access to customers. They need access to regulatory navigations. And they need access to implement their pilots, to prove that their concept works. So this is what ECA has to offer to all of our startups. That we don't just invest with money. We actually champion the startup to succeed in a different region.
Okay, I have one last question for Melvin and Aditya before we move to the questions from the audience. Now, for Melvin and Aditya, the both of you have successfully built a presence in the Middle East. How did you do it, and what are some of the biggest operational or cultural lessons you learned when scaling into the Middle East that was different from your experiences in Southeast Asia?
I would say for us, in the Middle East region, you first need to be able to understand the user behavior and the customer needs. For us as a company, when we first started off, we rely a lot on we rely a lot on trust, and we build around the word of mouth publicity. So in certain parts of the world, we rely a lot on affiliate marketing. But specifically in the Middle East, affiliate marketing is not known or not as popular. Similarly for Southeast Asia, it is more of an influencer or blogger dominated market. So hence, by understanding the ecosystem and the communication in each of these markets, we were fortunate to be able to tap into some influencers who happen to speak highly of Airalo. It's a combination of timing, the right time when they want to travel, people share it with their friends and family, and then that's where Airalo brand names start to grow, both in the Middle East as well as the Southeast Asia region. But I think the other part, like what I mentioned earlier, was also is also with regards to the strategic partnership side. Middle East as a market, because it's a more affluent, just as I was talking with Abdullah earlier, people there are using the newer devices. Or if not, they are using the latest iPhone, right? So with the newer devices, you are then able to use the eSIM service. Whereas in our part of the world, in Southeast Asia, many people, it's still quite a highly Android-dominated market, and people are still using the older devices. So hence, in that space itself, Middle East would definitely be a higher potential market. There is definitely a higher addressable market as well, even though Southeast Asia is a more populated market. So until the adoption or the understanding of the eSIM in the Southeast Asia market start to grow, and when people start to be able to change their older phones to the newer phones, then this eSIM product or the understanding of eSIM within Southeast Asia would then grow to the next level. So hence, we need to be able to always look at the market landscape, not just on a product front, but also on what is happening around the devices, the phone manufacturers, the government policies, in order to be versatile in our strategies as we go into the market.
Okay.
I think for the Anymind Group is in a very unique vantage position. We have very diverse value propositions for our customers. From creators that Melvin's talking about, which are the backbone. Yes, affiliate still is not a very strong ecosystem in the Gulf, but creators definitely are. We work with creators, we work with companies that are trying to import into the Middle East or export out from Middle East. So we are helping them to do that for cross-border expansion. As a company, we've also working with a lot of publishers locally to help them drive their monetization ecosystem. So I think as a company, we are fairly unique in that sense. One of the cultural lessons that we've learned is there are two speeds in the Middle East. It is very slow and then maniacally fast. So if you build trust, relationships definitely come before revenue. Hence, I alluded a little while earlier, travel to the Middle East, travel to Gulf. You build trust first, revenue follows. Once you build trust, and until you build trust, everything will move slow, very slow, snail-paced. Once you build trust, it will move at breakneck speed. And that has been one of the very hard found fact that we have had as a company in our learning. Second, I think is also, it has a lot of talent that it comes from different parts of the Arab world. And it is brilliant how you can bring in these people and you can train them, and a lot of companies that are coming in from Southeast Asia, because we've had a head start, let's say, in terms of technology, in terms of experimentation, we can actually take those frameworks back in and deploy those frameworks, train the so to say the Arabs there, and help. And what is happening with the Arab world is, because there is such a deep-seated appetite and hunger to grow, they are leapfrogging. The cost of obsoletism is far lesser in the Middle East today. It's almost akin to what happened to the Southeast Asian region, when the Western world the cost of obsoletism was far higher there. We did not, for example, taking Melvin's example, a lot of the generation sitting out here would not have even seen a pager, while US went through 20 years of pagers, right? We quickly got into mobile phones. And what Melvin said, today you have more and more devices that are available. So for him, the addressable market for eSIMs becomes that much more available in the Middle East. So for us, I think as a company, we believe in investing locally, building trust, and growing on that trust.
Right. So I'm going to move on to the questions from the audience. There are two that are specific to Middle East, so I'll direct them to Abdullah first. One is, are there any specific funds within MENA, or rather Middle East, North Africa, to invest in Southeast Asian startups? Are there funds or government programs within the Middle East along that?
So, not that I know of to the specifically Southeast Asian market. Most of them are general, and they're more solution-based rather than region-based or country-based. So I would say not that I know of, but if your solution works and it's proven, then there is somebody interested in your startup.
That said, some of your programs are actually open to international startups, not specific to Southeast Asia, but globally, right?
Yes, for sure. Most of our accelerator programs are open for international and global startups, not only specific to Southeast Asia.
Right. The second question also on Middle East. Given China's technological edge, what factors make the Middle East, MENA, or a more attractive region for startups to expand and grow to? Maybe we can start with Abdullah first.
Well, China's, it's a completely different market than the Middle East. China's, the Middle East is emerging. China is established and well-known, and has been there for ages now. And it's just a completely different market. Emerging markets are more fast-paced, more agile than already established ones. And I would say, in my opinion, they have more opportunity. They offer more opportunity because they're quickly getting there, and just like the gentleman here said, he said, so fast-paced change is strongly an opportunity. However, building trust first is the most important thing.
Right. Okay. Now there's a question which I thought Norman will be best to answer. Should a startup dominate its home market first before expanding to the other regions?
It entirely depends on what is it that you want to be at the end. This is a question that I often ask the startups, because I sit at the end of the grant approval, so this is one of my favorite questions. What is it that you're trying to become? What is it that you're trying to disrupt? So be clear about that. Then you work on your strategy, whether to grow locally first, regionally, and then globally. Because, if you're not ready for it, or you're not clear about what is it that you're trying to achieve, you're probably, on the pathway to, probably ending your business, But having said that, it is really important to understand all markets globally, actually. Because your solution may not be just for the local environment. It can easily be, if you do a little bit of modification, you can sell it even in China. Or a little bit of modification, you can sell it in Russia, Europe, US, or the Middle East, and everywhere, actually. So the world is definitely your oyster, and you should not limit yourself to just your local market, to just what you have in your hand right now. You need to expand it even. Try to maximize that potential of your solution and expand your market. Governments are always here to help facilitate and support all businesses, actually. As much as we can, with whatever resources that we have, we will try to support. and we build bridges between all ecosystems. That's what we're trying to do actually. We've done it in Malaysia, we're doing it locally in ASEAN, we're going to do it with the Middle East, we're going to do it with the China and Japan, Europe, everywhere. You know, be prepared for a very well-connected future startup ecosystem. That's my message here.
Right. I would love to have answered one more question, but time is up and the organizers have actually blocked off all the questions, but I urge all of you, if you still have questions for the panelists here, please go up to them after the session off stage, engage them. There are opportunities for you to still touch base with them, even though we are coming to a close for this panel. Thank you to all my panelists for your contributing inputs. Thank you to the audience for your questions. Thank you.